am Jordan Perks. I have been at Crible for 8, 9 months now. I've been an observability engineer for about a decade before it was even called observability engineer. And today I want to talk to you about moving from being a tool admin to becoming an observability engineer. That's not to say being a tool admin is a bad thing, because we all start somewhere. So our mission today is talking to you guys a little bit about that and establishing career training and certification in observability. This is a little bit about me. I'm from freezing too cold Bismarck, North Dakota. I am a U.S. Air Force veteran. In the Air Force, they decided to make me a network engineer. When I joined the Air Force, I did not even know how to spell the word Ethernet. I knew nothing about technology. My expertise was tequila and jet skis. And they made me a network engineer. Thank you, Air Force. I got out of the Air Force and sold some shoes for a little while. I was trying to break back into the industry. And I got lucky that I was hired by a local public utility and got to wear a number of hats. While I was a network engineer, I was also working with IP telephony. I was working with web proxy, firewalls, route switch, data center storage networking. I got to wear a ton of hats, and that really helped me in my career as an observability engineer, because I knew a little bit about all these different log sources that security teams needed, that operational teams needed. And, in that process of being a network engineer, I grew to love data. Why is that? Well, we had a giant banner in our office that said, "It's not the network," in big, bold font. Because the amount of times an application team or a storage team would come to us and say, "Network's broken," and I'd have the packet data to show, "Nope, your app is broken." And I was able to use that packet data to really learn the behavior of all of the apps under my purview, so I would be able to have better conversations. And we'll talk a little more later about better conversations. That's part of what being an observability engineer is, that differentiates it from being a tool admin. Right now, I'm a customer success manager at Crible. So larger accounts get me to help them on their observability journey. My years of expertise in the observability field as a whole really helps me in that. Right now, today, the view from my back door, I assume you guys can see my slides. If you can't, someone can come off mute and let me know, is we got a foot of snow over the last 24 hours. Things I like are, I got 2 boxers. They're awesome. Wife and I like being outdoors. This is the only waterfall in North Dakota. We enjoy glamping. That's our camper. It's basically a house. And I do enjoy a good bourbon. I was just in Kentucky. We got to view a bunch of bourbon distilleries, and it was a grand old time. The things I do not like, the view from my back door today. That's awful. I'm not a fan. So, observability engineer, bridging the gap between data producer and data consumer, right? What does that mean? As a tool admin, I was a Splunk admin for a number of years. And as that admin, the data producer would come to me and said, "Hey, security told me I needed to put this data in." Okay, let's put the data in. And that was the end of the transaction for the most part. "Hey, security, this new app team that runs the app called Banana Phone, we got their data in for you. Enjoy." And that was the end of the transaction. That's the job of a tool admin. "Hey, you need the data? Cool, I onboarded it. Consuming team, there you go, hand it off." But as you move into being an observability engineer and data, this gets you a little more conversational in rather than transactional. So There's a couple of resources I put on this. I think the slides will go out at some point, but I've written a few blog posts. I've done a webinar. Other folks at Crible have done some writing and some speaking on this topic. I included the links in there. So you've seen this before. I just left the slide in there. Not going to belabor the point. Perry did a really good job in the last couple talking to this. And same with this one. I just wanted to leave those in there so people can really see what observability looks like, right? So this is really where I wanted to go. It's a busy slide. You don't need to read it all. I use it to illustrate some of my points. The data is king, right? And I tell a story about one of my hobbies, and one of my hobbies is saltwater aquariums. And I was very good at keeping very hard to keep invertebrates, coral, and fish alive. But I didn't keep fish, invertebrates, and coral. I kept water. I was a keeper of water. And as long as my water was pristine, everything else just worked. Everything lived, everything thrived, everything grew. And that's how I think of data. You can have a million fancy tools and a million policies and procedures, but ultimately it's about your data and keeping it clean, available, and reliable. And one of the ways that I do this is, one, documentation, right? Not a fancy thing. Every engineer's favorite color is shiny, but what can you do with documentation of your data? Well, it facilitates conversation. It ensures that the data producer and the data consumer truly understand the requirements and what they're going to get out of it. And one of the most important things is telling the win story. When you're able to go to upper management leadership, when they say, hey, did you realize that our data analytics platform is the most expensive thing we have in security's budget? Did you know that our data analytics platform is our most expensive spend in AWS, in Azure, in GCP? And you can say, yeah, I did. But let me tell you what we're doing with that data. Oftentimes, the tool admin goes, we route logs. We provide them for analytics. Go talk to the 140 other organizations that we support. Find out what they're doing. Well, if you have these conversations, and the Crible tool really enables deeper conversation, you're able to capture the use cases in conversation, because you want to ask them as the observability engineer, what are you using this data for? Do you have compliant storage requirements? Do you and if so, what does that look like? Does it need to be in a hot bucket on very expensive solid state drives, or can we put it in S3 for retrieval and be able to search that within a few minutes of needing it? What does that look like? Having that conversation, because now that we have a tool that can route the data, that enables our conversation. Understanding what your SLAs and SLOs are. So what service level have you guaranteed, right? What is that service level? Will I respond to a problem in 24 hours? Will it be 8x5 by next business day? Will it be 15-minute response, right? So you have that agreement with the customer. The customer feels, oh, wow, they're really looking out for me. And then you're talking about their use cases. In this case, I took a screenshot of some documentation I did for a fictional app. And what we're looking at here is the authentication, user authentication. Who needs that? Well, there's two teams that want access to that. There's two data consumer teams. And so you've been working with the data producer teams to get this front-end application authentication into your tool. And now we're talking with the data consumer and saying, hey, security operations center, what do you use this authentication data for? Oh, we use it in these 7 rules, and these 7 rules are 1001, 1003, etc. Oh, okay. And let's take a look at those rules together. Oh, I see that you only use 9 fields. There's 35 fields in this event. Let's route that full fidelity data because we know we need it for compliance. Let's route that to S3, which is pennies on the dollar when compared to our system of analysis. Let's make our system of retention S3 or Azure Blob or MinIO on-prem. And very inexpensive to put the data there, cheap and deep, as I like to call it. And let's put just what you need for your security alerting and security research in the very expensive systems of analysis. And so now you've looked at it and said, hey, we just got a 300 gigabyte reduction in just this log source. How many other authentication log sources are in your enterprise? You got Windows, you've got route switch logins, you have network logins all over the place. You probably have something different for your Linux fleet. You probably have application authentication here and there. And how many times can you get this win? 300 gig here, 100 gig there, 50 gig there. And all of a sudden, you've been documenting all of these things. And when leadership says, hey, why are you the most expensive? Not only can you say, well, here's the 90, 100,000 use cases that we have, but we have been incredible stewards of the data, Sherpas of the data. Steward often has a specific connotation in the industry. So instead of data steward, we'll call them data Sherpas. And by leveraging our expertise as engineers, not just tool admins, we've gone and reduced the amount of data we're putting into these tools by $7 million, $1 million, 500,000, whatever size your organization is. And more often than not, we saved this much license, but that enabled us to be more secure because it allowed us to bring more data in. And let me tell you about the use cases we wouldn't have been able to do had we not brought in, not reduced the data so we could bring these new use cases on board. And so we're not seeing people go, oh, our system of analysis tool, we're gonna drop down and not spend $1 million a year. We've successfully brought down 500,000. What we're seeing organizations do is say, oh, thank you. Now we can bring in this data that maybe wasn't used for compliance, but was incredibly important for the security posture of the organization, was incredibly important for the operational posture of the organization. And so you're capturing these use cases, you understand what's going on. You are talking with the producers and the consumers, saying, how do you want to use this data? How do you want to produce this data? Let's talk about other ways of doing it. Hey, we've got these firewall logs coming in. They're 7 terabytes a day. And let's talk about these. Would you be okay if we said, hey, these 50 logs in 30 seconds are all the same? The only difference is the payload. Let's aggregate these. Something I've seen as a observability engineer, it's something I've seen other customers do. We use aggregation. You don't lose any fidelity because we compress them all together and we add up the total volume. You don't lose anything. Are we going to have to work together on maybe tuning some of your alerts in your tool because you were looking for if this happens 17 times followed by this other thing? We may have to change that alert a little bit. But as an observability engineer, I've seen this before and I can help advise you. Let's have a conversation about the data. Let's keep our data really clean. Let's get it to where it needs to go on time and reliably. And celebrate and evangelize your success, right? Again, documentation helps do that. And again, I'm not suggesting that documentation is the way to become an observability engineer, but what it does is it drives the conversation. So you're a tool admin, that's where everyone starts. I don't know an observability engineer that one day was like, I'm an observability engineer, I know all this stuff about data. They started as a Splunk administrator, as a Datadog administrator, as an Elastic engineer, etc. And they realized I can do so much more for my customers by just having these conversations. And when you have a tool such as Crible, the amount of things you can talk about is drastically increased. As a tool admin of let's just say Elastic, you're bringing the data in, you're formatting it, you're saying to your end user, it's done. When you have the choice, when you have the engineering prowess, when you have the experience to have, it's all about the better conversation and making those suggestions. Why don't we put the data in this low cost storage and route only the critical stuff over here? Why don't we transform this data? Look, let's add this lookup table. Didn't we have an asset database? Let's add the asset information to this. And 9 times out of 10, your end customer is going to say, you can do that? As a tool admin, you're not having those conversations. You're saying, okay, data producer, data consumer, done. But when you're an engineer, you're suggesting things. Hey, did you know we can add this asset information? Did you know we can add this identity information? We have these dynamic lookups in our Redis cluster. We're able to dynamically add different things to the data. We can strip the passwords out. Did you know that? Did you know that we can obfuscate data? Oh, really? Because we're not sending you a ton of these logs that would be so critical for us because they do have PII in them. I didn't know you could do that. Thank you, engineer. And that's what it's all about, is just having a conversation and really understanding what your customer needs and offering up solutions, not just putting data in point B that originated from point A. So in closing, the data is king. Keep it clean. Understand your customer and have a conversation. A lot of what we talk about in CCOE user and CCOE admin certifications is, of course, very Crible specific, but you start to learn about the types of choices you have. And this is true, while, like I said, it's Crible centric, the training. You get to learn, wow, there are a number of ways that I can manipulate this data to be more useful to those that need it. And training's fantastic. I got to be one of the lucky ones to beta test the admin training. I'm sure it looks a little bit different. I should probably go through it again, but it's really well done. I hope you get an opportunity to at least try it out. Not to mention, we have sandboxes. If you want to just stand up a sandbox tomorrow and play with Crible, you could do it right now. It takes 2 minutes to stand one up. You can stand up a sandbox and start playing with Crible in the next 2 to 3 minutes. Some standard slides that were in all of the other presentations I wanted to make sure was in here. Lots of different sources. We just added a database collector for MySQL and SQL, adding more databases into that every release. So many different places to put the data. So many. And as an engineer, as an observability engineer, you should know about a few of these. What are the most popular ones in the environment? How do I get data into S3? How do I get data into Snowflake? How do I get data to Azure Blob? Whatever your environment is all about, take a peek at it, right? Take a look at some of those destinations and see, what does it take? What are the pros and cons? What does that look like? Build out this big old slide. And we see we've got data lake for that full fidelity data. I'm looking at some of our metrics internally at how many customers now that never were before are routing their data into object storage. And they're routing like 9, 10, 12 terabytes to object storage, and then like 2 to their system of analytics. in the past, we've seen that like all 11 was being sent to the system of analytics because it was a system of retention. And as people skill up in an observability engineer role and see how can I do this better and start having better conversations, they realize that they don't need to put all this data into their system of analytics. They can have a separate system of record. And we're seeing that number move of the amount of people that are able to do this now. It's just growing and growing and growing. And that's because, in my opinion, people are skilling up on being an observability engineer. And two, our product's awesome. Included a bunch of links in here. I mentioned the sandboxes. You can create a cloud account. You can have up to 1 terabyte a day, your own Crible environment, 100% free. Don't have to enter a credit card number, nothing like that. It's 100% free, up to 1 terabyte a day. Go build. You can download it. You can get certified. I highly recommend our certification program. Darianne and her team are unbelievable, and they've done some really good work. There's a couple of blogs I posted up above about becoming an observability engineer, a webinar about it, and of course, if all else fails, RTFM.